So what's the origin of this video on the internet? Well, it's me. Honestly, I was so shocked when I saw Donald Trump make a statement where he strongly criticized, the Supreme Court, saying that they're being targeted by those radical extremists and the actions of those losers. That's what stopped them from doing a quick presentation. That's what they said, and there are, unfortunately, some losers out there, and that's what they say as well. It's very divisive to society as a whole, because it actually includes somewhere between 3 to 40% of Americans in this particular row. In this context, they don't have any public support at all. Everyone is just mocking them. Now, they're just relying on intimidation, right? That's the only trick they've got left to try to scare the Supreme Court. We can't let them get away with this kind of thing. So, I want to talk about how weak this controversy actually is, especially from a constitutional perspective. I really want to make the issue clear for everyone, based on what I've seen. There are a lot of MAGA supporters who keep on harshly criticizing the Supreme Court justices, right? This is a really serious matter. Basically, they're saying that it's only right to arrest them. That's what they're pushing for. Some people are even going that far. Of course, not all MAGA supporters are that extreme. So, what's the issue here? Let me first explain the issue to you about this matter. Donald Trump, right? I looked back and saw that about a week or two ago, he came up with a rapid deportation law. What did he reference? The Enemy Alien Act. This Enemy Alien Act, actually, in the past, was only used during wartime. That's when people would use the Enemy Alien Act. So, basically, it means that the United States is facing an invasion from these illegal immigrants and gangs, so they need to quickly deport these people. As soon as they're caught, within 24 hours, they can be kicked out. This is actually, in the Supreme Court, right? As everyone knows, there are 6 conservative justices and 3 liberal justices, and among those 6, 4 turned against him, making it a 7-2 decision. Especially those 2 people. Those 2 are Donald Trump's appointees. Especially the female justice, Amy Barrett. They really dislike him, those 2, and they wrote with the majority. They said, 24 hours. That's not enough time to use habeas corpus. Capas, as everyone knows, habeas corpus, I've always said, you don't need a ton of laws in China. I just need one, and that's if you claim there's rule of law in China, then habeas corpus is the most important one. It means no one can be detained without cause. So, if the police arrest you and scare you, not letting you out on bail, you can immediately apply to the court for habeas corpus. Then they have to release you, unless they formally charge you. Whether you get detained or not should be decided by the court. That's the decision. So in Hong Kong, if someone is detained, they must be released within 24 hours. That's what it means. This habeas corpus act is really powerful. It's written in the Magna Carta. This is the foundation of all rule of law, because people were afraid the king would just randomly arrest people. This is called habeas corpus, which comes from Latin. So, their argument is like this: do you have the right to deport those people? For example, those illegal immigrants. But then, is that person really an illegal immigrant? Are they actually an illegal immigrant? And do they have refugee status? Maybe sending them back could put their life at risk. Things like that. So you should still go through a proper process. At the very least, people should have time to invoke the Habeas Corpus Act and let the court review the case before making any decisions. But what they're doing is just labeling them as illegal immigrants, saying they entered the country illegally. So just because they broke the law. Like, entering the country illegally, it's not actually breaking the law, it's breaking a regulation. Those are 2 different things. It's not a criminal act. The point is, these people aren't protected by due process, and I'm really sorry, but I have to stand up for the spirit of the rule of law. Jefferson wrote, right at the beginning of the Constitution, that all people. This is something that goes without saying, something that doesn't need to be proven. Everyone is born with inherent rights. It's not just American citizens who have rights. As long as you're a person, you have rights, This is what I'm talking about, John Locke's concept of non-alienable rights. Everyone has these rights. And the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution stipulates proper procedure. Everyone is entitled to due process. So, let's say you arrest someone. Let me tell you, if the way you arrest someone isn't legal, for example, if you don't have the authority to arrest, or you don't have reasonable suspicion, but you still arrest them, and it turns out they're actually guilty, the judge still has to let them go, because what you did was illegal. Because if your procedure isn't legal, then the arrest itself isn't legal. The Fifth Amendment makes this especially clear as long as someone is in a place under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Constitution. It applies to everyone, whether they're legal or illegal residents. Everyone is entitled to due process. This is what procedural justice means. And as for the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9 clearly states that you can't suspend habeas corpus, except in cases of war or extreme social unrest. This is already set out in Article 1, Section 9 of the original Constitution. Then, Article 3 of the Constitution states that judges have the authority to check the actions of the executive branch, doing things that violate the Constitution. But the foundation is like this. That's the main point. Now, immigration laws can be set by Congress. But let me give you an example so everyone can understand why even undocumented immigrants have human rights. Can you tell me why? Proper procedure is part of human rights. Can undocumented immigrants be denied human rights? What does it mean to have no human rights? Do you know what it means to have no human rights? That is, if there's something if someone is undocumented immigrant, can you pull a gun, kill them without arrest, so they have no rights? Right. So does that mean you can just beat them to death with sticks? Let me ask you, there are a lot of Chinese people who are scared, those who cross the border into the U.S. as undocumented immigrants. So, one day, let's say there's someone who looks a lot like you. You're out on the street, and they don't care about your identity at all. They just grab you, say you're an undocumented immigrant, and deport you. Is that okay? And you don't even get time to hire a lawyer, not even 24 hours, you know that. You say you're not that person, but someone reports that you're a member of the Chinese 3K gang, and just like that, they deport you. They send you off to a black site prison in El Salvador, and who knows how long you'll be stuck there. It's basically a life sentence. Is that okay? That's what I'm talking about. See? Now, this is exactly why they think, wow, you guys are so outrageous. You don't even protect these legal residents, like, you treat them all as if they're rapists or something, and say they should all be deported. Yeah, no one's saying they shouldn't be deported if that's the case, but at the very least, you have to prove that they actually are, right? You know, this kind of thing keeps getting messed up. And in fact, it's been proven. I'm telling you, in the U.S. judicial system, since the 1990s, ever since DNA testing became available, hundreds of wrongful convictions have been overturned. These were cases where people used to think the evidence was rock solid. So why do we need to have proper procedures? Let me give you an example. I'll give you a simple example and you'll understand. Say someone is driving a car, okay. If there's no swerving or anything, but there's a checkpoint here, then everyone has to be checked because there are often people driving illegally here. Otherwise, if a police officer just randomly stops a car to scare the driver and then checks if the car isn't actually involved in a DUI or anything like that, if the driving isn't unstable, and it's just a normal car going about its business, you don't have the right to stop them just to see if they've been drinking, do you? Why is that? Why? Because if there's no law stopping the cops from doing that, then what if there's some really annoying guy who pissed off a cop, and every time he goes to the station or drives by, the cops just keep raising his case, right? That's exactly the problem. And then you just end up labeling him, saying, hey, this guy, test him for alcohol, and then search his whole car from top to bottom. They search his whole car, and then start looking to see if he has any drugs. In fact, they switch to looking for drugs or weapons, or any evidence of a crime. Is that okay? No, it's not. If you don't have a legitimate reason to suspect someone, even if You forcefully search his car and then find something like a wire in his trunk. You still have to let him go. Look, unless you stop him and have a legitimate reason, like you see bloodstains, then that's fine. In a public place, you can search. Otherwise, if there's no reason, then countless people could be harassed by the police just because they've offended them. Do you all understand why the law needs to have proper procedures? It's because it protects every one of us. So, what are some of the other major points? There are a few important ones. There's the constitutional argument as well. One of them is that this was made very clear in a 1968 ruling. Parliament passed an expenditure, and at the time, the President signed it, so it carries dual authority. It involves both the will of Congress and the President. And the next President doesn't have the authority to hold back that expenditure. If they did, it would mean that the powers of Congress and the President could just be vetoed by a single President. And controlling expenditures is mainly Congress's responsibility. So you can't just shut down things like Voice of America, right? Like Sesame Street and those kinds of things. These are all funded by Congress, and the President doesn't have the authority to hold back that money. Even things like USAID funding. Bill Gates has said that cutting it would lead to the deaths of many innocent children. So, there's that, too. This is clearly stated in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. Everyone born in the United States is a U.S. citizen. You can't just say someone isn't a U.S. citizen, and you can't force them out. First of all, you have to address this when they take their seat. That's just making things up, so they're taking a seat in the U.S. like that isn't legal. Then, if you revoke their citizenship, only then can you say something about it. And as for people born in the U.S., they can't be kicked out because there's no way to fake this. If it's proven, that's it. But now, there are some people who have been deported. Let me ask everyone again, if we refer to this Foreign Enemies Act or whatever it's called, if, say, there's a really serious conflict between China and the U.S., does that mean they could, like during World War II, detain all Chinese people just like they did with the Japanese, and put all the Chinese people into internment camps until the conflict with China is resolved? So, what I see is that some people now, and I want to be clear, I'm not saying whether something can or can't be done, but that even if you do decide to do something, you have to make sure to do it while fully respecting human rights and the law at all times, no matter if you're on the left or the right. It all ultimately comes down to one thing, and that is, this is the cornerstone of modern civilization, human rights, and scientific evidence. No matter what, these are the two things you must always abide by.